So if you don't want to be famous on the internet, on YouTube, you can mute yourself and turn your video off. Tonight, our presenter is Pat Hartman. Pat is a former Access MVP. I think we met in Redmond at one of those sessions in early
2006, I think it was. I think it was the insiders meeting where they presented to us.
Yes.
Is that where I met you?
I think it was that one. Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've kind of followed her work on Access World Forums for a while. And when we were discussing this particular demo that she had put together, I jumped at it because it was something of special interest to me. So I'm looking forward to hearing what she has to say on the subject. I'll turn the meeting over to Pat. She can do a quick introduction of herself and her work, and then jump into her presentation. Thank you.
Hi. This database came about because Uncle Gizmo, who is also Tony, if you know him, and I were discussing something that I frequently get on my high horse about on Access World Forums, which happens to be the use of the BeforeUpdate event and why and how people are not using that event as they should be using it. And so as I was preparing to make this video with Tony, I decided that I needed a way to display the events as they were running. And I came up with this form that I'm going to show you. And so it sits in the background and displays events as we go along. But before I do that, I'm going to do a little background first. So the database that you'll get if you want to go and download has 3 sets of instructions. You don't need to go through them, but anyway, they're little helpful hints on how this thing talks about. The form that does the logging has an option to export. And so there's a default path thing. You just set the default path and then it will export to there. We have the form that's going to do the logging. And if you're going to use this on your own stuff, you have to open this form and it just sits in the background. And then there's other stuff that's going on in the database that are my interesting examples. So one of the things I did to help is I made a form that I called, to get to the forms, event logging, okay? And so this form is just, oops, nope, I opened the wrong form. I'm sorry, so sorry. This one, copy me. All right, so it's just a regular form, but what I did was I put the logging code in, there it is, okay. So you'll see that all of the events, okay, are filled in here. Not all, obviously, but all the relevant events. I don't know what these events down below are for, but anyway, these are all the relevant form events. And in each event is one line of code, and that line of code calls the log event. It passes in the name of the form, and it passes in something that we're going to display so that you know what caused this thing to show. So most of the time, this will be the name of the event, form click, double click, whatever it is, form deactivate. Okay, and when you do it for controls, which there's none in here, then you have to give it a special name, a unique name. All right, so that's the background. So now we'll open the form. And it's got a couple of features. We can empty the log table. We can requery the log table in case it's not showing what you think it should be showing. And we can export the log table. The other thing is there's options here for which events you want to log. And we can look at the logging code later, but it's really very simple code. And there's options in the code that look at this so that it logs all events or form events only or control events or no logging. And so now I'm going to pick a form to open. And you'll see the magic happen. All right, so behind us, we have this form. Now, the events are logged, the events are displayed in descending order. So the oldest event is at the bottom. And I did this because as you do things, you don't want to have to keep scrolling to the bottom of the list. You want to see the newest things you're looking at the top of the list. So interestingly, the first thing that Tony noticed when I did this with him was he never knew that when you have a subform, the subform actually opens first. So we started right out in our adventure here, learning something off the bat. So I don't know how many of you know this, but the subform opens first when we open a subform. And so this is the order of events: opens, loads the data, resizes the form, and then it starts the current event. And then the main form opens, the load event runs, the resize event runs, the form activates, and then the current event runs. And so now we have the form open. So let's start by doing something very simple. I'm going to change the population here because there's code here in this event. And I'm going to make the population -2. And then I'm going to click into the subform. And it tells us population must be a positive number. All right, so let's go over here and look and see what happened. Current, okay. So the current event was the last event that ran when the form opened. So the first event that ran when I changed the population was the dirty event. And then the next event that ran was the before update event of the form. I don't have any control event on there. And in the before update event of the form, I have code that says the population must be greater than 0. So the validation code is irrelevant. The fact is it's in the form's before update event. We say, okay. And the code cancels the event. And so we stay on the event. And we can't close the form without it. Population, okay. The form's before update or events again. I say, okay. You can't save the record this time. So if I close the form, okay. This is the second before update event. We get the form error runs, the undo event runs, the form's unload event runs. Oh, wait a minute, undo. So I'm sorry, the form's undo event runs. So what it did, it erased my change. Then it unloads the form, deactivates the form, closes it, unloads it, the subform. So the subform now ends the step. So it loads first, but it closes last. And so our last event is the close of the subform, and our first event is the open of the subform. Is that news to anybody? So now if I open the event again, oh, by the way, if you have questions, I don't mind being interrupted because this is not a formal presentation. I don't need, you can distract me all you want, and we'll just go back over the events.
Pat, I do have a question.
Okay.
Is there a way to force the parent form to have an event before the subforms?
Absolutely not.
Okay. I feared so. I've run into several situations where I wanted to run an event, but could never figure out how to do it.
Nope. This, there are things that Access does, and Access does them, and you don't have any control over that. And the order in which events occur is one of those things. And Microsoft does a really poor job of explaining how that works. And if you play with this tool enough, you'll see why it's virtually impossible for them to write any documentation on the order in which events happen, because there are just so many conditions. Well, if I do this and then I do that, well, then these events run. But if I do that first, then those events run. And so they just can't document it. But there are things they should document better that they don't, okay? One of the things they should document better is their intention for a form, okay? An event. So their intention for the current event is what? What do they want us to do in the current event? What do they think we should be doing in the open event? Why did they make the load event, okay? What was their anticipated need for the load event. Now, all of the events in the form are essentially hooks, okay? There's a main line. There's thousands of lines of code running to populate our forms, and it's all written by Microsoft. We don't get to see it. We don't get to change it. In their goodness of their heart, they have given us places where we can add code to a form to make it do something that we want to do. So in their wisdom, these are the events that they came up with. And to my knowledge, there has not been an event added since I started working with Access. Now, I wouldn't swear to that. Obviously, the new, the web forms and other stuff, if they added a new kind of form, they obviously would have added new events. But given the old standard forms, the events that we see today are the events that the developers built for us, in the early 90s, right? And they all had an intention behind them. This is what they expected us to do in the load event. This is what they expected us to do with the resize event. God knows what we would do with the resize event. I have no idea why I would ever want to write code in the resize event. Maybe somebody knows. I can think of code that I might want to write in the activate event, but there we go. All right, so now we open to the form again. And if we look back at what we changed, you'll see the 66,000 is still there. This is all right, so let me clear the log, okay? Because we can clear, so I had a button on clear the log, because if I click on this form and then clear the log, I've created events. And then I click back on this form and I've created another event. So in order to keep the noise to a minimum, I added the clear log button over here. So now let's go into the subform and look at the before update event. So what we have here is we have code that's in the forms before update event, but we have no code that's in the controls before update event. Open. All right, we'll clear the log again. I'm going to go to the end because I added a bogus state. I'm going to add a bogus city. All right. So now we're going to try to delete this. So when I click on this control, first we see the enter event. Now this enter event is when you enter the subform control, which is why it's on the main form. In case you haven't noticed, if the event is running on the subform, its background is pink. If it's running on the main form, its background is clear. And then we have the mouse down, current event, mouse up, and then click event. I can't justify the order. Maybe somebody else can, but that's the order the events run in when I clicked on that to select the record. Now I'm going to delete the record. Now I have code in the relevant delete events, and what the code is doing is just simply it's telling you what the name of the event is, and it's displaying a value. Because when you delete an event, when you delete a record, frequently you need to know what the ID of the record is that you were deleting. And so what we're saying here is that it's showing me the city name. So the city name is still populated at the time I click the delete event and say, okay. And so the next thing that runs is the BeforeDeleteConfirm event. And we can see that the city name has been cleared. We can also see that the current event for the subform ran, and then the BeforeDeleteConfirm event ran. Again, I can't tell you why this particular order of events happens, but if you're, go ahead. Does somebody have a question about this? Do you have an idea? Because remember, right, we click the delete, and then the delete event ran, and the city name was populated. Then I clicked OK, and so it processed the delete, but now the current event runs. So it's showing us the empty form. I guess that's why it does that. And then it's running the BeforeDeleteConfirm event. And at the time the BeforeDeleteConfirm event runs, the data in the form is gone. And that's relevant in some conditions.
That's exactly where I would have lost my house.
Okay. So I might have also, for exactly the same reason, okay, because I thought it didn't go away until after this event ran. And clearly we see it goes away before this event ran, which is why I'm displaying the values in there. So it's easy for us to see. And so now we click OK. And now we're going to get the message that says, do you want to delete the record? And for now, I'm going to say OK, because the other condition is really bizarre. So we'll say OK. And now in this event, I'm showing you the status because you'll see the relevance of this later. So this is the status code in the after delete confirm event. This is in the header. Okay, so this is the status coming from Access. And then again, the city name is still blank, which is not a surprise. Now it's gone, right? And so now the record is gone. We're back to the star, right? And so I'm going to add the record back in. All right, now what I'm going to do is, see if I can make this a little bit bigger without hiding my header. Right. I'm going to insert a separator, okay? I also did this because after a while you lose track of where you are. When you insert a separator line, the form name says dummy. So there's conditional formatting. So if this conditional format, if the field form name starts with a D, it does everything purple. If it starts with an S, it makes it pink. That's all that is. And now I'm going to go and I'm going to select this again, and those same 4 events run that we saw earlier. And I'm going to select delete. The value is there. We say OK. The value is gone. We say OK. We say, yeah, this time we're going to say no. I don't want to delete it. Okay. So right now, the last event we're looking at is the forms before delete confirm event. That's the last event that fired. So now I'm going to say no. The form's current event runs. Now the after delete confirm event runs, and the status is 2. So I didn't go look and see what these mean, but apparently status 0 means the delete proceeded, and status 2 means it was canceled. That's my assumption. And there's probably other statuses, then they may indicate errors, but I didn't do the research this afternoon to find that out. But here now we have the after delete confirm event. We're back showing the city, okay, is there again. And there it is. So it's hard for you to follow this when I'm doing it, and I get that. So if your mind is running in circles, I understand it. But if you take this home and you play with it, you'll see in your when you're clicking the buttons, you'll have a better understanding of what it is you're trying to do. So for now, let me go and try a different form because it has some different stuff in it. Control. So this is the control stuff. All right. So again, I'm going to clear the log. All right. Now, this I built because somebody had questions about why control events were not running when they dirtied the control using VBA. So I don't know why they don't run. All I can tell you is they don't run. So I'm going to change the name of the governor with VBA. Okay, so it's changing it to 6 characters. Now, this is silly and the data is silly, but the validation logic that's going to happen is it's just looking for a governor name of 10 characters or longer. That's all. I'm going to say OK. And so we changed it. And we leave the control. We get no error. We can save the record. And we get no error. Okay. And we show you on the form here, design view. So the governor has code in the before update event. So in the before update event of the governor field is validation rule that asks if the governor field is less than 10 characters. If it's less than 10 characters, it displays an error. Now, we didn't get that error, did we? Nobody saw that error because it didn't happen. So that means that when you change the value, so let's go back. Here's the, open the form. I'm going to clear the log again. Now I'm going to change a different field on this. So I'm going to change Alaska. I'm going to save the record. And we get no error. Okay, so let's go change Alaska back before we forget. And now I'm going to add a character here. And so now when we click into another field, we're getting the error message from the controls before update event. Right, so we can see that when you change the value of the control using VBA, the events don't run. Save, we get an error, we can't save it. And to change it again, we're still getting the error. We can't get rid of that error. So we have to we can hit escape and be rid of it that way. All right, so now I'm going to clear the log again. And now I'm going to press the change button. Okay, it's telling us that it's going to change it to this value, 6*. Okay, no control event ran. When I clicked into it, but now we've got focus into it. And I change it here. And for every character I type, first the dirty event runs. And then for every character I type, the change event runs. So I'm going to do a few more X's so I get enough so that they're more than 10. And I'm going to save the record, and it lets me save the record. So the point of this little examination is twofold. First thing is we need to understand that if you change an event, a code, a control with VBA, the current events, none of the events are going to run. None of the form level events are going to run. However, as you'll see in the next example, the form level events do run. So let's find out where that example went to. Oh, I know, the other example is in the other form, sorry. You can't do all these in one form because you have to set up different conditions. So down here, I'm sorry. Sorry to be fumbling, that's really awful. Before update event.
Pat, everyone's quiet, but I just want to say you're doing a good job, and this is interesting stuff. So
okay, I'm sorry about looking for this because I keep losing the code that I want to show you, right? And I need to know what control it's in.
Yeah. Thank you, Ben. I have this problem every single month. I get wrapped up in the presentation and forget that I'm supposed to be paying attention.
Yeah, I know I can't present in silence. It's just too hard for me to do it. I need the interaction.
Yeah.
Right. So it's, it's
I
easier.
always say, we're not going to buy the product. So it's better if we see all the issues that you have.
Right. Well, we're not seeing
But
issues
not
with
to
the
worry.
product. We're
No, I'm
seeing
not
issues.
saying.
We're seeing. Yeah.
We're not a client. We're not going to purchase this.
No, I'm giving it to you. What you're seeing is
No, I'm just
issues
saying.
with
I'm
the
just saying.
with the presenter's memory
So
about where
whatever
the code
issues
is
you
that.
have, finding the code, any of it, it's all interesting because it shows that all the rest of us have these issues all the time.
Right. It's just everywhere you go. Okay. So let me just read my notes because I did make notes. Oh, okay. I know what I was trying to show you. It was the exit event. There it is. And that is population. Okay. That's the one I wanted to show you. All right. So let's open that again. Okay. Clear the log. Okay. And this time, the validation code, instead of being in the before update event of the control, which is a viable place, although not necessarily the most optimal place. It's in the LostFocus event. Now, I frequently see people experts telling people, oh, put the code in the LostFocus event. Okay, well, we'll put the code in the LostFocus event. So here we go. So we're going to put this -2 again, because that's what the logic is. The population has to be greater than or equal to 0. And it says population must be a positive number. Okay. All right. I can't click out of the form. I can't save the form. Looks like it works, right? How many people think this works?
I'm betting that it doesn't.
Well, yeah.
What about when you close
yeah.
the form?
Well, that's what I'm going to do now. Okay. Do you think this is going to work? Because I showed you before when we did the first example, when I put -2 in it and I closed the form, the undo event ran. Is the undo event going to run in this case?
Stay tuned for next week.
So I'm
All
already homeless because of my bet on delete. So
okay, so all right, so the validation code is in the LostFocus event. We can click anywhere we want to click. Okay, we can save. We can try to save. It's not going to let us go. It seems like it's going to work, right? Right. Okay, so let's close the form. Sorry about that. Say yes. Okay. Population number must be positive. Okay. I'm going to click right by that error again. Okay. Going to click right by that error again. And there goes the form. Open. And there it is. The bad data got saved. So I guess LostFocus doesn't work. So let me go back and change it again. Okay, so that's fine. So let's go back and change this. Save. Oh. Now this validation code is in the controls before update event. Okay, it's not going to let us save it. Not going to let us save it. So we're going to close it. We're going to blow by the error message again. We're going to say you can't save a record at this time. This is our first warning that Access is going to do something. And if you watch over on the left, you're going to see that undo event run. There you go, undo. So now we open it up again. Okay, the value stays the same. Okay, so the next thing I need to show you is why you don't want to use the controls before update event. Okay, so we're going to go and we're going to add a new record. I'm going to say save. Okay, so we could add the record. Population is null. Nobody's complained because the validation code was in the controls LostFocus event. Well, the control never got the focus, so the validation code never ran. Okay. Same thing with the governor. Governor field never got the focus, so even the before update event didn't run. So if I change this again and save it now, it's still going to let me. Okay. But now when I type something into it, it's giving me the validation code. So it is running. So what happens here is if you have a required field and your code is only in the controls before update event, if focus never enters the control, then it's never going to be able to check for null. So therefore, you always have to have the code in two places. If you put the code in the event instead of in the form, you have to have code in the event, which can do the validation, but you also have to have code in the form in order to prevent the null from being saved. So personally, I put all my code, my validation code, in the forms before update event, unless I want to specifically say something to the user at the point in time where he's doing the data entry. So sometimes, if you have something like Social Security number where you're going to validate the code and make sure it's unique, and you are not going to allow the user to save the record, well, then it makes sense to add code into the before update event to make sure that you tell the user early as possible that his data isn't going to get saved. It's less annoying than waiting until all this stuff is entered and then coming back and saying, well, sorry, sucker, we're not changing the record. We're not saving the record. So I do use the before update event, but only in that particular situation where I'm going to stop the save entirely.
So you're talking about the before update for that control.
For the control, for any control, right? So, so I say like 99.9% of the time, 100% of my code for validation goes in the forms before update event. A very small percentage of the time, I put additional code in the controls before update event, and that's because I want to tell the user immediately before he moves into another field that he has to have a valid value in the field we're in. So it's a user-friendly situation here. See, do I have anything else I want to show you? Oh, yeah, there's one other thing too that I discovered. And let me clear the log again. So I added a second button to do this. So in the first button, the code, let me show you the code. So in the first button, the code just sets the value in the governor field. So this is the governor.value. In the second click button, I'm going to put the value in the text property. Now, in order to reference the text property, I have to set focus to the control. So it sets focus to the governor control, and then it puts the value there. In this case, the change event runs. Okay. So let's watch that. So this was the only situation I found where a control level event would actually run. So I click this. The change event ran, and then the before update event for that control ran. Now it's giving me an error. Okay, so I never pursued this. I would not do it, is my recommendation. Okay, because for some reason Microsoft does not want VBA to change the value of an event, of a control. And so I'm going to go along with their decision and not ever do it. Or at least not expect to change, not expect the validation code to run. Now, if I can change it. Do I have, and I think the validation, right. So even though the validation code, let's go back here. Hope it is running. So it must be in a different form. I can't show you this example because it is two conflicting things. So what I was trying to show you was the before update event of the control would not run, but the before update event of the form would. But I don't have that example set up, so I can't show that to you. Okay, so now does anybody want me to try anything that you think might be interesting? Because it just takes a second to add the code.
Well, I think if you, on the control change governor with VBA, if you set the focus, I think that will cause it to pop up the error message.
All right, so let me do that. You think change the first one or the second one?
No, the top one.
The top one doesn't get an error message.
I know, but I'm saying it might if you say set focus before you change it.
Okay, I disagree, but okay. Wait,
Let's
this
try
is I understand. This is the kind of thing that we can try here, and there's no problem.
Right. So before you
try
set, yeah.
Right. Okay.
Let's see what happens.
Okay. Compile. Save.
Good.
But it's in a different.
It's in the LostFocus event of the population control. Oh no. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute.
Set focus, it will.
Can I jump in too? And the way that I handle this, and I think Crystal put a comment that this is the behavior that's been that way forever. What I do is after the VBA that sets the value, I just run the whatever event that you want that you got your validation code in. And I use it all the time in combo boxes. Like typically when the user changes a combo box, it fires the after update event. But if for some reason I want the code to change it, I manually in the VBA just run the after update event.
Yes, you can do that. I'm not going to argue with you. You can do that.
And I think that's the way it's designed.
No, I don't think so. But that's okay. You can do that. I tend to not run. If I tend not to call the code in control in event controls, control events, control inform events. And the reason I don't call the code from some other place is because of something I learned a long time ago, 50 years ago, about coupling in cohesion. And it's an expectation that a procedure is not going to be used except in an obvious way. So if I'm going to reuse code, I will put a call into the code from both procedures. So I might do what you're saying, okay, but not the way you're saying it. So you have code in the forms after update event or whatever. So if I decide that I want to use that code in a different situation, I will move that code to a procedure, and then I will call it from the after update event, and I will call it from the other procedure. Therefore, when somebody comes into this program later on, they can see that this code is being used not just in the after update event, but this being used for another purpose. It's just a way of preventing breaking code later on down the line. I mean, I'm sure that you've wondered, like every month when a new version comes out from Windows, how that could possibly have broken. What could somebody have changed to break this particular feature? Okay, and the answer is that feature was using some common piece of code incorrectly or at an inappropriate time. And so the expectation was that whoever changed the procedure didn't have to worry about anything else because nothing else was using it. And so that's how we create random breaking code.
Well, I think in principle, I'm agreeing with you and following what you've just said. And I shouldn't have used the after update event in.
Well, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
But because you're demonstrating with the before update to validate the data. So
Right.
then following your logic, what you would do then is have a separate independent subroutine that would be called data validation for such and such field. And it would be called from two places.
Right. But
Yeah.
and exactly, that's exactly what happens. That's why all my code, my validation code, is in the forms before update event. Because if I change the code, if I change the value using code, the control events don't run, but the record is dirtied, and therefore the before update event is going to run. So the validation will run. It just will run only in the before update event. Okay, so that's how I handle it. So if I'm going to change it with VBA, and I do change values with VBA on occasion, I just don't rely on the controls events to validate. I always use the forms events to validate, and that handles the problem without having to do two calls or two separate pieces of code. It's a one-stop shop as far as I'm concerned. Unless you have a reason to not use the forms before update event. All right, so that was interesting. Okay, so having the focus in the event gives us a different message. I'll go experiment with that more and see if I can understand why that happens and if that's dangerous. All right, so if you want to use this yourself, okay, clearly you can make whatever changes you want to the two forms that I have, or you can take this form and empty this again. So if I open this form without, you don't have to use any of this stuff over here because that's not really relevant. I just did that because I thought that's the way I was going to go with it. But you can just add your own code in here. I mean, you add your own form and run it. So as long as you've got code in the form events, it'll run. So let's see how that code works, just to carry the whole thing through. So log event code. Okay, so it does a case statement based on what the values of that of the option group are, so that it knows which events to log, whether we're logging all events or only some events. And then it runs in an insert statement, an SQL insert statement, turns the warnings off and runs the stuff, and then it requeries the form. So that's pretty much it. So the code inserts the log event record and then runs the requery of the form. So it's really.
Is there a reason, Pat, you're using the do command to run the SQL instead of current DB execute?
No reason. It just came out that way. It's not relevant.
So I've been trying to catch up with chat. There's several comments in the chat. You want us?
Okay,
Are you
all
at a
right.
point where we can switch over and kind of catch up with that, or do you want to?
I don't have anything else to show unless somebody wants to see something, unless you want me to change some code to try something else.
Well, let's go through some of the comments and questions in the chat.
Okay.
All right, so I will start right up here. Kent observed that you can prevent the subforms open event firing by late binding the subform.
Okay. Yes, you can.
And in my world, that's called lazy loading the subform, but I think
Right.
there's
Yeah. Right.
and that's true. It does load the subform in whatever sequence you call
Right.
it.
Yeah. I mean, if I
Yeah,
have only,
on-
yeah, on the occasion I have a form that has multiple subforms, I'm much more inclined to do lazy loading than if I have a single subform. Then I don't ever.
Yeah, I'm just more inclined to be lazy.
Yeah.
Right. So if there's one subform, I don't see the point of lazy loading. If there's a tab control, then I do see the point of lazy loading.
Well, if I'm working against a SQL Azure or SQL Server backend, I will sometimes lazy load.
Well, I lazy load all my forms. Let me put it that way. Okay. I open no form bound to a table or bound to a query with no selection criteria. So every form opens either with a passed parameter to a specific record, or it opens empty, and then you use the search button on the form to load a real record.
Yeah.
But when I load a main form, I'm not sure if there's a real reason for not loading the subform at the same time.
I have a side story that I'll save for another
Okay.
time. I had a client once who refused to let me do it that way. They wanted every record loaded up front.
Just like,
Well, don't
and
they
you
know
and you
best?
and you let him get away with it. Okay.
Well, it was either that or not get paid. So anyway,
Okay. All right.
you got
You know,
to
the-
It is surprising to me, though, that a subform loads, like if we have linked child fields and linked master fields, then obviously it doesn't know what to load.
Is that why it
But
runs
it loads
twice?
first.
Is that why they run twice?
Well,
yes.
it must be.
Yeah.
So like just extra time. The first time, who knows what it's loading?
I never thought of that before, but I'll bet that is the case, isn't it?
Does it actually? Let me look at it again.
It
Does
will
it actually?
execute.
Watch. Let's see.
Let's see what it does here. But
Okay, so it does run the load. So you're right. We have no idea what is loading. I thought maybe it skipped the load event, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the current, I thought I would see the current event a second time.
It used to run a second time, and I don't know why it doesn't. That may have caused too much of a problem, because people used to write about that all the time, because they would have code that would run multiple times and then they would have errors.
I anticipated it's mostly an annoyance, but yeah,
Right.
it could. Okay, so back to the comments. Question about resize. Let's see. Resize event has been made redundant mostly by anchoring. Anchoring and tabbed interface, I think, have made resize less important. I agree with that. And Crystal contributed. On resize, you may want to make sure they don't make it too small or reposition a form to where you want it to be. I'm not sure what the comment try the change event was for, Kent. What was that in reference to?
I don't know.
Pat was
That was a
doing
half hour ago.
LostFocus.
That was a half hour ago, and
Yeah,
we've all forgotten.
he made that comment when the LostFocus was getting the problem.
So Crystal then pointed out, that's the way it's always been, events not running when VBA changes values. And so we have to call events, we have to trigger events to handle that.
Right. So you use the forms before update event,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, it hasn't changed that I know of either.
Okay. So the problem with LostFocus is that that control after update has already run. That may be why you saw the error when you set focus to the governor field and then used VBA. Is that possible?
I think what was happening, there was other code running that I hadn't really thought about in that situation. So I don't know. The validation rule for something else ran.
Yeah. So there's definitely a deep level of events that we don't always see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kent says, let's see, you should be able to catch that error, and I'm not sure which error we're talking about, in the forms error event. With SQL Server backend, I use the forms error event to catch not nulls where the control never even gets the focus. I think the forms error event, I agree, is a place for that. This one, I'm going to ask you to unmute and explain, because I can take this one of two ways. Why population control? Can you unmute and introduce yourself and give us some context?
Sure. You were getting an error message said that the population control was raising the error, but yet I don't think there was any interaction with it at all. So I'm wondering, where did that come from?
I can't tell you, and if I'll try to reproduce it and see if I can figure it out what it was, but I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to come up with the exact sequence of events that we followed here.
Yeah.
And unless somebody was, and obviously we've deleted all the data, so unless somebody was following along and what we were seeing in the event log, I can't tell you what the answer to that is, why that event was being raised.
Well, I think it's because the LostFocus event was running, but the value had already been committed to the control, and i.e. the field.
Yeah, that's really tricky. I agree. In my mind went straight to why population control, because there are too many of us. And that's how easily I am distracted.
I was trying to make the simplest data set I could that had a valid main form and subform.
Without thinking about the double entendres. Okay.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, my thought went to like cut and paste error, where maybe the population control was announcing itself, or some other control was announcing itself as the population control just by mistake.
Well, does anybody remember
I
what was this? I think this was when we were playing around with the text field. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's try that. So let's.
Isn't that expected given?
Yeah. So, okay. No, this wasn't quite the right. This wasn't quite it, because what happens when I do this. Hang on. Let me just move the code over here so you can see it. Where did no? That didn't help, did it?
But you had put.
I'm trying to get where the.
You had put the set focus in the other version, and that's where.
Yeah. I just wanted to stop the code and get in the code module. Okay, so so that error got raised over here, and that. Okay, so the error got raised in the forms before update event. Okay.
Another possibility would be to simply do a search in code for population and see if it's somewhere it shouldn't be.
I'm pretty sure it's not, but I will look at it and see if I can reproduce that particular error. It had something to do with when we were playing with these two buttons.
Yeah. Click the top one and see if that the change governor with VA.
Okay, so
Yeah, that's the one we're talking about, I think.
I think you're right. I think that's it.
It's the lost focus event of population control is what it's announcing itself as.
We didn't have focus, so why did it say that?
oh wait a minute. Okay. All right. So let me see if this maybe it's the error message is bizarre, because that happens with copy and paste.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let's go. Yeah, that's it.
Oh,
There you go.
that was too simple.
It was too simple. Okay. There was no mystery to it whatsoever, except that.
Just have check your spelling though.
Sorry.
Governor's got an R.
Oh, picky.
We're in beta here. Who cares?
Well, code is that way. You get used to.
There should have been an event to trap for that.
I once had a programmer who worked for me a long time ago, and he couldn't spell. And this is in the days when we were still using key punches and stuff like that. And so it was a real pain in the ass to go change it. And I used to make him change it. Okay. Because anybody else looking at those programs was just going to keep making typos, because they would be spelling the word correctly and it would be incorrectly spelled in his definition. All right. Thank you. Thank you for finding that typo, because I make lots of them. Okay.
You're welcome. Oh, and I was asked to introduce. I'm new to the group. My name's Chuck, and I've been programming VB6 for ages, but then I'm kind of new to Access.
Okay.
Well, we're glad to have you with us.
Thank you.
Where
Yes,
are you
thank you.
located?
Greenville, South Carolina.
You're on the East Coast.
Yes, it's late here.
Oh yeah. Well, Pat's in New York, and no, I mean, Pat's
Pat,
in Connecticut.
I'm in Connecticut, but yeah.
Linda's in New York, so
Okay.
we're spread all over.
You guys seem more alert than I am.
Right. All right. So anyway, so there's a link to the database. If you want to just download it yourself and play with it, you might find interesting things, as I did as I was playing with it. And, if just maybe you can figure out why some of these exotic sequences actually happen. What makes sense? Okay.
Well, yeah.
Where is the link?
I will post it. Okay.
I figured that was on your page.
Chat amongst yourself, and I'll go find it.
So the version you're going to download is very, very slightly different from this, because I made a couple of additions of tests today, but nothing relevant, so it's just a matter of what code events are in.
Well, we know it'll have the typo.
Yes, it will definitely have the typo. So if you do the same thing, and it won't have the set focus in both of those events. And I think I added more code regarding the delete event, because I got intrigued by the stuff that I was seeing in the delete event.
Okay, I thought the database would be up in the event, the page for today, but I don't see it there.
If George can upload it, that's fine. I couldn't do that. So I just posted a link to where it is on Access World Forums. If you're not a member of Access World Forums, you might have to join to download it.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know what their policy is about downloads. I know everybody can see it, but I don't know about the download policy.
I think you can download it without logging in.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will add it to the AUG website, and when I upload the video to YouTube, I'll include it in the description there. And I just put it into chat. Oh, I put it.
Okay.
I just sent that to Kent only. So let me try again, everyone.
So the other thing at the link on Access World Forums is 2 videos that I did with Tony Hine, who was Uncle Gizmo. and he's the audience. Okay, and so he asks the silly questions that the audience is supposed to ask. And we actually had a few chuckles going through it, because we both came across situations that we just had no idea that was the way it worked. Who knew?
Well, yeah, I started out by saying I would have lost my house if I had bet on that delete thing.
Right. All right. So I'll tell you what to do. Most of the events have no user code in them. All right. So if you want to look at stuff like that, so we got all this event code here. So all you have to do is go into the code, and every event has this one line in it. All right. And if you want to test other things, just put some additional code in there that displays data, or whatever you want to show. And so that will help you with your understanding of how the event is working. And so, I tried to do the minimum possible in order to show the relevant examples, which was, why the LostFocus event doesn't work, and why the before update event of a control is less optimal than the before update event of the form, which was the target of the 2 videos that I did. And then there was some other stuff too. One of the things Tony didn't know was that the change event runs for every character you type, because you frequently see people referencing the change event and saying, "Oh, I used the change event for that," when they really mean the before update event. And so what happens is they're doing the same validation every time a character gets typed.
Well, that could be because I think the macro is called change, and maybe they learned first with macros and thinking that they're going to be called the same thing in VBA.
Well, that could very well be, but I see experts recommending it. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. But anyway, so the change event runs for every character you type.
So the only time I could ever see using the change event would be if you're trying to do some sort of contains search, and you want to match each letter as you type it.
That's the only valid reason I've seen for using change also. People use it for validation and doing things like controlling formats and stuff like that. I guess that it's a way, but I think the code becomes very complicated when you do that. I would just use the before update event and check the whole pattern rather than checking a pattern character by character.
Oh, well, for the change event, I sometimes use it to, if you've got a control that'll only take 20 characters and people start banging on past 20, it's nice to give them a bit of feedback and say, hey, don't bother.
Right. Well,
20 is your limit.
Yeah. So that's the reason for using it. But again, I tend to do all my validation in the before update events. And so if you can't have more than 20, you can stop it there too.
Yeah, but if you're trying to stop people putting characters in numeric fields, then your KeyDown event's probably a better way to do that.
That's another, you can use that.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
It's kind of just related to what we were just talking about. Does anybody here have any recommendations for code to do find as you type in a combo box to help it narrow down the list? Let you do a wildcard search? Because I wrote one that's a class and it's been crashing on me because I got a little too fancy with it. I have it using the record set of the combo box, and it doesn't seem to like when I adjust the combo box's record set while it's open.
George actually has me presenting on that in 2 months.
Oh, so that's going to be in your presentation?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a great segue then on to the future. You guys, thank you. I didn't pay you enough, but you did it anyway. Okay, so next month,
Great topic.
with any luck at all, we'll have a dual presentation with Tom Wickerath and I. And I will use SSMA, SQL Server Migration Assistant, to upload tables into SQL Server, and Tom will demonstrate some scripts that he has in VBA to do the same migration, and you can kind of compare the two approaches. And hopefully you'll find one more amenable to your style than the other. But I thought it was we've had a lot of questions here and in other places about, using SSMA and other tools to migrate. So we're working on it. The reason I've delayed it a couple of times is that we would like to use the Northwind 2 data model to do that. And since that keeps getting pushed back, we didn't really want to release that into the wild until it was officially released by Microsoft. Hopefully it will be done by the end of this month and we'll have something. If not, I will be looking for a new presentation in wait a minute. We're in March now, aren't we?
Yes, this is March.
Yeah.
April is the next
Yeah,
meeting.
yeah, April. Yeah, we'll be it'll be April. Yeah, hopefully it'll be April. And then the following month, Eric has agreed to demonstrate some of the work he's done with classes and kind of branching into what Ben was just talking about, searching and filtering and sorting on forms with classes. And we had a quick run through the other night. I think it's going to be really impressive for the ability to do that kind of thing in classes. And it fits really well with one of the things that came up tonight, which is moving code out of 20 places in a form into a common location. Yeah, in classes. So I'm looking forward to both of those. Hopefully next month we'll go off as planned. And if not, I may be desperately looking for a fill-in, but hopefully they will get it done. Yeah.
Okay.
We're doing, actually, I will make one more comment. We finally got feedback from Microsoft just yesterday and today on accessibility. We have to pass Microsoft accessibility standards.
And what would those be for this thing? Okay.
Actually, most of them are totally reasonable. Color contrasts, foreground, background, font sizes, location and position of controls, that kind of thing that make it easier for a screen reader to read it.
Yep. Okay.
But I have some thoughts that we'll hash out tomorrow, I hope. Anyway, I thank you very much. I think I better close down the recording.